I hadn't been back in nearly 2 years. Flying in from Houston, I imagined Mom's pie on the windowsill, Dad complaining about the cold, and Cassie yelling from the kitchen about how the turkey was too dry again. That's how it was supposed to be. Instead, I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home and felt nothing. No cars, no lights, just silence. The porch was covered in a blanket of fallen leaves. The steps creaked under my boots, and when I reached for the doorknob, my old key still worked, just like always. I pushed the door open and stepped into a cold stillness. The air was dry, heavy, curtains drawn tight, furniture draped in dust like the house had been holding its breath. I called out, "Mom? Dad? Cass?" Nothing, not even an echo. I walked farther in, each step more hesitant than the last. My boots tapped on the hardwood floor, the sound of them unfamiliar in a place that used to feel like skin. A low wheeze broke the silence from the hallway. I followed it. There, in the back bedroom, lay Grandpa. His thin frame was barely a shape under the covers, his skin paper pale, cheeks sunken. Tubes ran from his nose to a machine that hummed steadily beside the bed. When he saw me, his lips curled faintly. "You came back," he whispered. I knelt beside him, brushing back a strand of hair from his forehead. "What happened, Grandpa?" He didn't answer, just held my hand, his grip weak. His eyes darted toward the nightstand, a crooked family photo, last Thanksgiving. Everyone smiling, lying. There were no other sounds in the house. No pots clanging, no TV in the background, no Cassie's voice bouncing off the walls. Just Grandpa's breath, the mechanical sigh of the oxygen machine, and the weight of everything I didn't know yet. I wandered into the kitchen. The fridge clicked as I opened it, bare. A container of old broth. Wilted spinach. Something in the back had turned. Then I saw it. A note, left square on the table. Written on plain paper, the ink slightly blurred. Couldn't handle it anymore. Don't call. Take care of him. That was it. No names. No explanation. Just cold, final words. I held the paper like it might explain itself if I stared long enough. My hands shook. My throat tightened. Who wrote it? Why leave like this? I ran through the house, checking for more clues. Nothing. I dialed Mom. Voicemail. Dad. Straight to dead air. Cassie. The number you have reached. One after another. No one picked up. I stood in the hallway, phone still clutched in my hand, and suddenly I was 17 again, waiting by the door for someone who wasn't coming. I sat on the couch, eyes unfocused. The silence made room for memories. I remembered how Mom started keeping to herself after Grandma passed. How Dad's beer cans started showing up in odd places. How Cassie and I fought like strangers over a will that hadn't even been read. Last Thanksgiving was the last time we were all together. Even then, it wasn't really together. We sat in the same room but lived on different planets. And Grandpa, he was the quiet one. The steady one. The one who didn't say much but always showed up. Sometimes the silence says more than words ever could, he told me once. Now, I finally understood. I walked back to his room. He looked asleep, but his eyes opened when I sat down. "They're not coming back, sweetheart," he murmured. I looked at the pill bottles on his dresser. Half full. Some expired. Hospital bills in a neat pile. The landline blinked, a single voicemail waiting. He reached out, touched my arm. "They left me here last week. Said they needed time." I didn't answer. Couldn't. I checked the thermostat, it was colder than it should be. Checked the plumbing, sink leaked. Heat hadn't been turned up. Grandpa's meds were low. No food, no calls, no signs of life. I stood still in the hallway. A weight sank into my chest. This wasn't a visit. This was a reckoning. I wasn't the guest anymore, I was the last one standing. Do I call them again? Show up at their doors? My thoughts were spinning. Or do I stay? Fix what they broke. Watch over him. Make sure he's not left to die in silence. I sat beside Grandpa, pulled the blanket up over his shoulders. He smiled faintly. "I'm here," I said. But my hands were clenched. Something burned beneath my ribs. That night, as I sat alone beside him, the front door creaked, just once. I woke up stiff and cold, my neck bent at an awkward angle on the old living room couch. The cushions hadn't softened with time, they'd just given up. The blanket I'd pulled over myself was barely enough against the draft that slipped in from the windows. Morning light came in through the bent blinds, casting long slashes across the floor. It was gray out, that sort of heavy sky that makes everything feel suspended. No smell of coffee, no sound of a frying pan, no hum of conversation from the kitchen. Just wind brushing dead leaves against the porch and the tick of the wall clock that no one had wound in months. I moved through the house slowly. Familiar, but distant, like walking through a memory I wasn't ready to remember. Every room was as it had been, but hollow. I noticed the dust wasn't just from a few days. Mail stacked at the door. A layer of film on the photo frames. This wasn't recent. Grandpa was still asleep when I crept back into his room. But not for long. His eyes opened as I sat beside him, and he gave me that weak smile again. The one that looked more like an apology than a greeting. "You stayed," he said. "I had to." He tried to sit up, failed, then gave up and just looked at me. "Your mama," she didn't say a word. Just started packing. Took a few things, then she stopped talking. Wouldn't even look me in the eye. I waited. She didn't want Cassie to yell, but that girl. He paused, shaking his head. Cassie screamed out back in the garage that night. "What night, Grandpa?" He squinted, confused, like he was trying to pin down the shape of a thought that kept slipping away. Then he mumbled something I couldn't catch and closed his eyes again. His hand gripped the blanket, pulling it up under his chin. Like a child bracing against a storm he couldn't see. I stayed with him a while. Watching, waiting, but all that came back was silence. By mid-morning, I needed to leave the house. Needed to feel something other than stillness. I drove into town to pick up some basics: milk, canned food, Grandpa's prescriptions. The town hadn't changed. Same church bell, same boarded-up diner. But people looked at me differently. Or maybe they didn't know what to say. At the corner store, I gave the cashier my name for the rewards card. She paused, the scanner mid-air. "I thought y'all moved months ago," she said. Not mean, just surprised. "No, just me. Visiting," I lied. She didn't ask more, just rang up my things and gave me exact change. At the pharmacy, the guy behind the counter looked at the prescription slip and nodded slowly. "We were wondering," he said. "Glad someone came back for him." I thanked him, left, and sat in the car for a long minute. The engine off, the heater cold. The town thought we were gone. No one had said goodbye. No one had sent word. Back home, I stared at the blinking red light on the landline. One new message. I pressed play. "Maela? It's Mrs. Taggart from next door." Her voice was strained. A cough in the background. "Something don't sit right. I saw Darla, your mama, 2 weeks ago. Suitcases. She put 'em in the back of the truck. Then that same night, your sister and father, they all left. Drove off without a word. Left your grandpa sitting in that chair by the window. He didn't even have a coat on." She paused. The silence on the tape felt louder than her voice. "If you ever come back, you come talk to me first." Click. That message had been saved. No one listened to it. No one deleted it. I went out to the porch with a notebook and pen. The cold had crept in again, but I didn't notice it much. My hands moved on their own. Darla, Cassie, that night in the garage. The lack of forwarding addresses. The mail. The note. I remembered the fight. Cassie yelling something about the will. About how he always favored you. Grandpa left me the house. But he never told anyone that to their face. This wasn't just a family drifting apart. This was an exit. Planned. Executed. Without hesitation. I wrote their names down. Circled them. Drew lines. Darla. Cassie. Dad. Who did what? And why leave Grandpa? The sun started to dip by the time I grabbed the mail. Mostly junk. Ads for roofing. A coupon for car oil. But one flyer had something tucked inside, a yellow envelope. No address. No sender. No handwriting on the front. Just the words, "You shouldn't have come back." I froze. My thumb ran along the edge of the envelope. It wasn't the paper that chilled me, it was the handwriting. Even after all these years I knew exactly who wrote it. I walked into my grandfather's room a little after lunch, the autumn daylight muting the colors of the walls. The temperature felt lower inside, part of the house's mood maybe. I didn't say a word. I just searched until I found what I didn't know I was looking for. The drawer under the nightstand drew my attention. I had never opened it before. The brass key on the nightstand looked like one of those decorative items you don't question, but I picked it up and slid it in. It turned. The drawer popped open, and inside lay an envelope stamped, "Final Will, Bixby Estate 2019. My pulse skipped. Words blurred as I held the paper, saw my own name, Maela Bixby, as primary heir. That contradicted everything I'd believed for years. Dad's voice echoed in my mind. "It's just paperwork," he'd said. Now I saw the proof that it wasn't. I closed the drawer and left the envelope on the bed. I walked back to the living room, laptop in hand. I remembered the hearing aid Grandpa uses. It always sat on the nightstand. I grabbed it and, with a small extension cord, plugged it into the laptop. An audio file popped up. His voice, quiet but clear. "They won't let her speak. Remember who you are, Maela." Then another cut. "Grandpa, help me." Laureen took the papers. My throat tightened. I replayed the tape, paused it, let silence carry its weight. I felt anger like a fire starting behind my ribs. They weren't just absent. They were acting. They hid documents, they rewrote reality. I wasn't imagining it. At the dining table, I spread the will, hospital statements, tax files and account transfers. The date, October 15th, hospital admitted. October 20th, transfer to Stroud Family Trust. No signatures. The printer page number, 17. My pen hovered. I wrote, "Question everything." Dad's words, "You worry too much," still hung in the air. But worry wasn't enough anymore. Action was. I clicked open the folder labeled Corwin Thatch, Estate, and scribbled a call reminder for tomorrow morning. I felt the shift. I wasn't discovering anymore, I was responding. I walked into the living room. Footprints in the dust led from the front door to a designer suitcase. A coffee cup on the end table bore lipstick marks. A charity brochure, Maris Gannett Foundation for Elder Care. I whispered to the empty room, "This has your name on it." But no response came. Laureen and Kenton had been here. They left the clues behind. The room felt smaller when I realized the predator isn't hiding, it's right next door. I backed out slowly, crouching, breathing steady. I decided then, I'm moving. They may have set the board. But I know my move now. Night fell. I sat by Grandpa's bed. The IV machine's glow lit his pale face. I held his hand. I told him, "I promise I won't leave you alone again." His eyes held pride and worry both. I reached into my pocket and pulled the mustard yellow handkerchief he gave me at 10, laid it on his over chair. This moment marked something new, not victim, not silent daughter, but active defender. I stood in the doorway to leave. The living room door at the end of the hall was cracked open. A faint draft slipped through. I flicked on the hallway light. Fresh footprints in the beige carpet. I realized the next move was mine, or theirs. I walked into the living room and stopped short. The dining table was set for 6 china plates, silver utensils, cloth napkins. Candles still in their holders. Chairs pushed out as if someone had just gotten up. I called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" My voice sounded small. The house was empty. I touched a cushion. It had been sat in recently. My memories crowded in, last year's laughter, Dad telling a turkey joke, Mom gently chastising Cassie. None of that now. Just a wreath on the wall, its red ribbon faded. The moment felt like someone pressed pause and moved on. I stood there trying to make sense of the space. Then I checked my phone. The family group chat still open, no new messages, nothing since Mom's last one. Don't forget to transfer the loan. No funny gifts, no dinner details. I texted, "I'm home. Grandpa's here. Why aren't you?" Silence. I thought about Dad's old motto, family comes first. But the accounts, the empty house, the lack of contact, said something else. I remembered when someone told me, if you can't count on them when you're standing right here, what are you standing for? I switched off mobile data, sat with the phone in my hand, and resolved, stay focused. In the hallway I found a suitcase, a designer one. Hair ribbons lay atop it. Lipstick marks on the handle. Underneath, a boarding pass, Majestic Aurora, Caribbean cruise, dated the week after the note at Grandpa's table. Couldn't handle it anymore. Don't call. My throat tightened. I remembered Dad's buffet photo on Instagram. Caption, leeches and negativity. They packed the bags, cruise booked, while Grandpa questioned whether someone would show up. Pain reset itself into clarity. This was abandonment with flair. I entered Lorraine's old room. The scent of lilac lingered. Ambition seemed folded into the bedspread. Her laptop was open. A slideshow titled Family Legacy 2024 filled the screen, images of our house, of my grandparents, but captions. Founder, Lorraine Riker. I whispered the question, who founded it? You or me? I deleted files, saved PDFs, printed a page where my name was removed. I slipped it into my pocket. I heard footsteps on the stairs, someone was coming back. I sat quietly, laptop closed. When the door opened, Mom stood there, eyes red, wine on her breath. Maela? She asked. I replied, we need to talk. The air shifted. I placed the printed document on the table. She tried to speak, then stopped. In that moment the camera on the coffee table flashed. The family group chat captured a live photo of Grandpa asleep, alone. That was the moment I realized the mask had slipped. They'd worn one for years. Now I didn't need to shout. I just needed to wait. I slid the envelope from my bag and laid it flat on the dining table. The room was quiet except for the creak of the old ceiling fan above me. My hands didn't just tremble, they ached, stiff from gripping the truth too long. I peeled the flap open and pulled out the printed file. My eyes caught the familiar seal first, Virgil Bixby's. Or at least, a version of it. It was off. Too clean in some parts, too smudged in others. It looked like someone had copied it, badly. Below it, Trust, Stroud family, sat bold and smug. The signature beside it wasn't his. Dated nearly 6 months ago, during his rehab, when he couldn't even write his name properly. My throat tightened. That seal Grandpa let me use it when I was a kid. I'd pretend I was running a real lemonade stand. Seal it official, he'd joke. I thought it was cute. I thought it meant something. Now I was staring at it forged on a document that transferred his life's work out from under him and me. Next to the file, I'd taped the printed email from Lorraine. Once we get control, he won't notice the cruise deposit missing. Cruise deposit. I felt heat climb up my neck. All those years I scraped together money, night shifts, car repairs, medical copays, and they used it for a vacation. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, watching that seal fade under the lamp, like it was ashamed. Then my phone buzzed with a calendar alert. I didn't need to check it. I knew what it was. Visit Grandma, family photo shoot. Set 2 years ago. A nice reminder. A little guilt pill I kept swallowing every time it popped up. And I always ignored it. I walked slowly past Grandpa's room. The hallway light spilled in through the cracked door. His oxygen mask lay on the carpet, coiled, forgotten. That mask should never be on the floor. He'd been alone again. My chest sank. I leaned against the doorframe, stared at the mask like it could explain all of this. Maybe he'd be better off without us. Maybe all of us had failed him. I was ready to leave. I reached for my bag, keys in hand. But then I heard it, barely more than a whisper. You don't have to stay, but I'm glad you did. He didn't even open his eyes. And I didn't walk out. Instead, I powered up my laptop and opened the encrypted email folder Corwin had sent days ago. I'd been too afraid to look before. Not now. There they were. A will from 2019 with my name intact. A ledger showing every trust transfer, names, dates, suspicious timing. And an audio clip labeled Grandma Chairs. I clicked it. Grandma's voice cracked through the speaker. Empty chairs always tell on the living. It hit me harder than I expected. I created a folder called Family Audit and backed everything up. A new drive, labeled, hidden in plain sight. Then I started listing questions. Why were there withdrawals the same week Grandpa was admitted? Why did the property deed no longer list my name? And who signed the documents on his behalf? I typed a short message to Trudy. If you have proof of what you told me, bring it tonight. No pleasantries, no explanation. She'd understand. Later, I walked down the hall toward Dad's old office. He used to call it the bunker. Not because it was safe, but because it kept his secrets in. I hadn't opened that safe in years. But I still remembered the combo, his birthday backward. The lock clicked, and the door creaked open. Inside was a folder labeled Vacation Fund 2023. Receipts, cruise bookings, bar tabs, Champagne photos. Majestic aurora. I recognized the handwriting on the notes. Lorraine's, room 406, balcony view. And then I saw the social media printouts, his Instagram post, no more leeches. I snapped photos of everything. Zoomed in on receipts. Took timestamps. Labeled them. Filed them. You used my sacrifices for your escape, I said, standing alone in that room. Not loud. Not bitter. Just the truth. I left the office without turning off the light. Let the silence do the shouting when Trudy walked in later. I zipped up my coat, slid the evidence drive into my inside pocket, and stepped outside. The porch light flickered. My breath formed little clouds in the cold air. The porch camera blinked red above the door. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and hit record. I'm done carrying it all alone. Then I slipped it back into my coat and stepped into the dark. The morning came gray and cold, the kind that seeps into your bones before you even open the blinds. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee steaming in one hand, the laptop open in front of me. The house was quiet, too quiet. I clicked on a folder labeled Family Legacy 2024, one of Lorraine's projects. The slideshow began to play automatically, smiling faces, perfect lighting, hollow warmth. Then I stopped at one frame. Lorraine hugging Grandpa, her smile practiced, captioned, "Thankful for my rock." Something about it felt off. I turned to the refrigerator behind me. The same photo, almost. Only in this one, I was in it. My arm around Grandpa's shoulder, his laugh real, not forced. I looked back at the screen, my image gone, cropped clean. I pulled up the file data. Uploaded at 2:34 a.m. by Emily. I knew that time. Everyone should have been asleep. I took a screenshot, sent it to Corwin with a short text. They staged this. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. My hands weren't shaking because of nerves, they trembled from the pulse building behind my ribs. I wasn't looking at a family portrait anymore. I was looking at evidence. They'd rewritten reality one photo at a time. When you've been gaslighted long enough, even the truth starts to feel like betrayal. But this was clear. The lighting in the photo didn't match the curtains in the kitchen. The reflection on Grandpa's glasses was fake, pasted in. I could see the line where they cut me out. I leaned back in the chair and whispered, "Not this time." The words came out steady. I shut the laptop halfway and glanced toward the hallway. The house smelled faintly of dust and cleaning spray. I walked into Mom's study, a room that hadn't changed since she left. The trophies still glowed under the soft lamp. On the desk, a card leaned against a porcelain angel. To Cassie, "Thank you for keeping Grandpa safe." I froze. Cassie hadn't been here in weeks. She was the kind of cousin who posted quotes about family but never showed up when things fell apart. I opened the card slowly. Inside, it read, "You're the only one we trust with this legacy. Maris Gannett." My chest tightened, but not from surprise, just disgust. They'd reassigned my work, my care, my nights spent watching over him, to someone who hadn't lifted a finger. I whispered, "Recognition isn't earned when it's stolen." That's when I noticed the watermark on the card, tiny, embossed. Gannett Legal Consulting, the same office that handled the trust transfers. Every fake thank you came with a legal signature. They'd rewritten history with stationery and ink. I took a photo of the card, flipped it over, filed it with the others. My laptop hummed awake when I sat down again. I drafted an email, subject line clear and cold, "Immediate audit required, Bixby Estate." I attached everything, the slideshow metadata, the altered photo, the thank you card, the trust ledger. Then I built the timeline, document signing, cruise booking, fake upload, and the mailed card. The pattern was too clean. It wasn't sloppiness, it was confidence. They believed no one would check. Before hitting send, I texted Trudy, "Bring the footage you captured. We move tonight." When I walked back to Grandpa's room, the early light was creeping in through the curtains. His breathing was shallow but steady. I sat by his bed and spoke softly, "We move tonight," silently. The moment felt like the calm before something larger, like standing on a frozen lake, hearing the cracks forming beneath your feet but knowing you won't fall through this time. Then, just as I zipped the drive into my bag, my phone buzzed again. The family group chat exploded with notifications. Dozens of messages, one link pinned at the top. A live stream announcement. Watch the reveal of the real family caretaker tonight at 7 p.m. Underneath, the caption read, "Someone has to pick up the slack when the weaker ones fall down." I stared at the words until they stopped moving. So that was the game. They were going public, trying to frame me as the failure, the ungrateful one. They were flipping the script before I could speak. I closed my laptop gently, almost with a smile. "You want a show?" I said quietly. "You'll get one." Outside, the sun had already begun to fade behind the trees. The air had that sharp edge of winter, clean and cold. I stepped onto the porch, pulling my coat tighter. Across the driveway, headlights cut through the dusk. A car door slammed. Two voices, laughing, carefree. Suitcases hit the ground, another trip, another escape. I raised my phone, focused the camera, and zoomed in on the license plate. The click of the shutter was soft, final. "This ends with your name and mine in the ledger," I whispered into the cold. The laughter carried for a moment longer, then vanished into the night. I sat beside Elio Stroud in the living room, the old tube TV flickering as he switched between cartoons while the house buzzed with dishes and voices preparing dinner. He wasn't even 3 feet tall yet, but when he looked up at me and asked, "Aunt Maela, why don't they love you like they love Cassie?" everything froze. His words were simple, but they landed like a verdict. I swallowed hard and pulled him closer. "They do care about me. They just don't show it the way they show it for Cassie." He shrugged his shoulders, innocent. Then he said, "Then why does Grandpa always ask for you?" And that's when I realized, the real weight wasn't in their absence, but what they showed to everyone else. My throat tightened. A hard knot of sorrow and clarity twisted inside me. Later that night, a knock echoed on my front door. I opened it and found Trudy Hamill standing in the dim porch light, coat pulled tight, eyes serious. "Maela," she said, voice low, "you ought to know, they didn't just leave for a vacation. They carefully packed your name off the estate first." She handed me a small USB drive. My fingers brushed hers for a moment. She looked worried. "I was afraid to say anything," she admitted. I punched in the drive. Inside was video footage. Dad and Laureen helping Grandpa into a chair, then stepping into a SUV, driving away. Grandpa's confusion was front and center. I pressed pause, stared at the frame where the SUV pulled away. "How long have you known?" I asked her quietly. Trudy exhaled. "Too long," she said. And I couldn't risk him alone. My heart ached with fury and gratitude both. Armed with the evidence, I sat in the living room while voices echoed up the stairs, Mom entering, Dad behind her, Cassie laughing with someone on the phone. Empty chairs waited at the table. I stood slowly, the USB drive and documents in hand. "I saw the video," I said. "I have the files. We're done hiding this." The air changed. Laureen's practiced smile wavered. Mom's face paled. Dad clenched his jaw. Cassie looked away. No shouting. No tears, not yet. Just silence filled by the sound of papers hitting the table, a confirmation that the story had changed hands. In that moment, I felt the power shift, from their narrative to mine. After the confrontation, I retreated to my old bedroom-turned-office, the room where I once kept a journal of dreams. Midnight light seeped in. On the screen, the family audit folder glowed. I planned the next move. File the documents with Corwin Thatch, call the elder care ombudsman, maybe tip the press. I reached for Grandpa's yellow handkerchief, the one he gave me when I was 10, and held it in my hand. A steady reminder. I texted Elio, "You asked the right question." I whispered into the darkness of the room, "I'm not just reclaiming my name, I'm reclaiming what he built." The air felt alive with possibility. Outside, the night wind carried the cold of early winter. I stood on the front porch, laptop bag over my shoulder, eyes on the driveway. Headlights approached slowly. A car stopped. I heard the door open. "Maela, we need to talk," Dad's voice rang from the vehicle. I closed the laptop and took a step toward the porch light. Whatever door they'd opened, I was ready to walk through, or shut it myself. I pulled into the driveway just after the hearing ended, the sky dark and silent overhead. The house was lit from within, windows glowing like beacons, but inside I carried papers in my hands like armor. On the mantel sat a framed check, made out in my name. My breath caught. It should have meant something warm. Instead it hollered of promises unfulfilled. I set the legal envelope beside it. I opened it. Inside, a draft contract. Sale of 123 Maple Drive, Bixby Estate. Signatures. No notarization. No name of mine. I looked up at the family photos on the wall, one without me, one labeled, "Together Always," with me cropped out. My heart thundered. The check was the bait. The contract was the trap. I sat down, let the silence stretch, and remembered Grandpa's words. Power is quiet until you claim it. I later slipped into the lawyer's office across town. Midnight oil still burning. Corwin Thatch handed me a sealed folder. I opened it on the spot. The notarized version, my name gone, Stroud Family Trust inserted. I leaned in and said, "This reflects what they intended, not what was ever spoken." The lamp overhead flickered, ink still wet. The statement printed up top, "If you don't move, we'll move without you." I snapped a photo with my phone lens glinting. Sent it to Laureen and Kenton. "You've gone too far." I walked out into the chill, the night air biting my cheeks, the city distant. I felt every step like walking into the fight I'd been preparing for. Back home, the living room filled with voices, footsteps, muffled greetings. Mom appeared. Dad followed. Laureen with Cassie trailing. They didn't know what I held. I didn't stand. I remained seated, phone in hand, the contract flashing on screen. "Maela, we thought you moved on," Mom whispered. I answered quietly. I had to move on, to something real. "You moved on, to my neglect." Laureen's smile faded. Cassie dropped her gaze. Dad's arm curled inward. The power slid from their hands. In that moment, the story changed owners. The papers hitting the table made a sound louder than any shouting. The clock ticked past midnight. The storm outside softened into a hush. Everyone left, except Grandpa and me. We sat in low light. I handed him the framed check. My name clear. He placed his frail hand over mine. "You came home," he said. I felt something soften, relief mixed with the ache of what we'd lost. Snow began to fall outside, soft flakes against the window, each one reminding me of time and change. I whispered, "We'll mend what we can, together." Then I opened the front door to leave for the night and saw the envelope taped to the storm door. A plain manila folder. I picked it up. On the front, "The story isn't over. You just turned the page." I slid it into my coat pocket, looked at Grandpa, breathed in the calm of the falling snow, and stepped out into whatever came next. The next morning came wrapped in stillness. Snow clung to the window panes. The house felt like it was holding its breath. I walked to the front door, peeled the manila envelope off the storm glass, and sat down at the dining table, hands trembling. Inside was Grandpa's handwriting, steady, strong, even in his final days. There was a notarized copy of a will. And a letter. "Maela," it began, "I saw this coming long before the rest of you. The cracks, the silence, the posturing. I hoped I was wrong. But I also knew I couldn't leave it undone. Some bridges must be built alone. I built this one for you." The new will bore the date, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. Everything was transferred to me. Legally sealed. Quietly done. I sat there, in a house that had held so much noise, so much pain. Now all I could hear was the refrigerator hum and the paper in my hands. The smell of an old apple pie still lingered from days ago, sweet, stale, fading. He had done what none of them expected. He'd believed me, not out loud, not for show. In writing, in law, in love. And still, I wished he hadn't had to do it alone. I moved room to room after sunrise. The hallway was empty but carried echoes, of slamming doors, of laughter that once felt whole, of arguments that had chipped at everything. I stopped at the den. Sat on the carpet. Found an old recorder tucked under the end table. I pressed play. Grandpa's voice. Reading Psalm chapter 23. My throat closed. My eyes didn't water, they just held. The phone buzzed in my back pocket. "Mom." I let it ring. In the music room, I left a note on the piano. "If you want to rebuild, come honestly." I closed the door to the guest room. Locked it, not in anger, just enough for grace. The town hadn't changed. Still snow-dusted sidewalks. Same chipped paint on Mr. Bledsoe's barber shop. I walked with my coat buttoned up and my hands buried deep. Ms. Arlen was brushing snow off her porch when I passed. "You stayed," she said, smiling. "Yeah," I answered. "This time I did." We talked for a minute. She told me how Grandpa used to bring her peaches when her legs got bad. Said he used to fix her mailbox without telling her. At the Veterans Monument, I stopped. Pulled out the folded flag he'd given me and laid it against the stone base. I didn't speak, just looked at it for a while. Let the wind pass through my chest. It wasn't a town that trapped me. I just finally let it be what it was, and let myself be what I wasn't before. The courthouse clerk blinked when I handed over the papers. Everything signed, sealed. House now mine. Full transfer. Wasn't expecting that, she said. I smiled, just barely. Long story. Out front, I sat on the cold concrete steps, pulled out my journal. I didn't write what happened. I wrote what it meant. All those years, letting silence tell my story. Not anymore. Now it's mine, no louder than needed, but honest. I was never looking for revenge. I just wanted truth to sit at the table with the rest of them. That night, I dusted off the dining room. Not for guests. For myself. I left Grandpa's chair right where it always was. I framed the check he gave me. Added a new label underneath it, paid forward. Called the shelter. Asked how I could help. Opened the book he loved, marked in ink on page 71. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. I whispered, let's make it better. Turned off the lights. The house sighed back. Then I heard it, just as I stepped from the kitchen. The front door creaked open.